Sunburn. Sunburn's just weird, I don't like him. First of all, I think his design is super boring and uninteresting, but second, he just isn't fun to play as. His flame breath doesn't feel very... I know my opinions are always correct, but something about this feels wrong. I do not like Sunburn, and clearly that's something that people don't enjoy hearing. But I'm clearly not alone. Sunburn is a special Skylander for one specific reason. He is the most neglected Skylander in the entire series. After all, he is the only one from the original 32 to never receive a new figurine of any kind. And Giants thought it'd be funny to list him as a Series 1 for no reason. They could have at least given him a Battlecast card. You're telling me Muscle Sprout deserves one and Sunburn doesn't? Poor guy. Was his lack of love from Activision due to poor sales? Did they wake up one day and decide they just hated him for no reason? I'm not entirely sure. What I do know is that I need to start being more open-minded and give Sunburn the chance he truly deserves. After all, he is one of, if not my least used character from the first game. I love Skylanders, and if I have to make a Basically video to possibly remove a Skylander off of my no-likey list, then so be it. I mean, it didn't work for Sprocket, but she's a special kind of terrible, so I'm sure we'll be fine here. I know that I've not given Sunburn a fair shot in the past, and it's time to make that change. No stupid jokes this time, nothing dumb's gonna happen, let's just get straight into it. So with no further ado, let's try and master our Sunburn skills. Basically. So Sunburn is a phoenix, an ancient creature first depicted in Egyptian mythology and always associated with fire. Hey, this is starting to come together now. This idea practically fell on Bob's lap. Sunburn is actually the only phoenix-dragon hybrid known to exist. This, and having the unique ability to teleport, made him the most wanted creature in all of Skylands. Huh. Ironic. Because he was always being hunted down by bandits and sorcerers trying to steal his powers, Master Eon offered him protection by joining the Skylanders. Wait. You're telling me he only joined the Skylanders for protection? Is Sunburn even a good guy? There is absolutely no evidence that suggests he is a good guy. This is happening too often, Eon. Start running some background checks. So that's his very disappointing backstory done. Time to look at his stats. Sunburn is a pretty well-rounded Skylander with slightly below average speed, but above average health, especially compared to other ranged characters. But as we'll find, he's up close with enemies a lot more than you'd expect, so these stats fit his playstyle quite well. Speaking of which, let's get right into his moveset. The first attack gives us a flamethrower where Sunburn breathes a stream of fire in front of him, dealing constant damage with decent range and power. It lasts for 4 seconds, allowing you to get a lot of hits in the right situation. However, this move makes you pretty vulnerable, so use it with caution. Sunburn is going to be an interesting Skylander to talk about because of how different he is depending on the game you're playing. To start with, in Spar's Adventure, his flame breath is significantly worse in the X-Spec versions compared to the Wii version. In the X-Spec versions, the attack hits enemies half as often for some reason. This makes it not only janky to use, but also nowhere near as fun. I think this could be why a lot of people, including myself, weren't too fond of Sunburn to begin with. It's always the box's fault. We're not done yet though, because in Giants, the flame breath is really good at pushing enemies back, which allows you to keep your distance. However, in the later games, the best you'll get is a very small stun. Even in Giants, you're still open to attacks from anything that isn't in front of you, but this makes a massive difference because you're gonna struggle to get good value from the flame breath in the later games. You aren't completely helpless though. You can still move around to dodge enemies while using the attack, however not as gracefully as usual. Sunburn's running speed stays the same, but sharp turns slow you down to a grinding halt and make you move in place. Turning a little bit is fine, but if you want to change direction and keep the flame breath going, you're making yourself incredibly vulnerable. It's a much better idea to just stop the attack, turn quickly and then attack again. As long as you play smart, this attack can be pretty solid. The second move is Immolation Teleport. We are talking about the same kind of immolation here, right? Well anyways, this move allows Sunburn to teleport forwards, damaging nearby enemies at the beginning of the move and again when he reappears. If you hold the button, he can stay hidden for a few seconds, which is useful because he is completely invincible in this state. If you're getting overwhelmed, this can be a great way to prevent attacks that you couldn't dodge otherwise. There is a little bit of delay before you can use the teleport again, which stops you from just spamming it over and over. Because of this, you should still rely on the flame breath as the main damage dealer. Speaking of which, this move works really well with the primary attack. You can put yourself in vulnerable positions and still get out of them unharmed if you time it well. It's a fun and effective move, and whether he's killing himself to create a new Sunburn in his place every time he teleports is none of our business. So looking at Sunburn's basic kit, I already see a lot more potential in him than I did before. I just hope his 4 base upgrades aren't wasted, because sometimes it's the fundamental upgrades that make or break the Skylander. The first upgrade gives Sunburn the ability to teleport in 4 different directions. This is a pretty cool idea and it works quite well. It gives Sunburn a ton of different movement options, making it even easier to avoid attacks. It doesn't necessarily change anything about how he plays, but it's a helpful addition for sure. Next up is a damage increase for the primary attack. I don't think I have to explain why this is a good upgrade, but I will anyway. You might not think the damage increase is that big, and I would agree, but because of how the flamethrower works, you'll notice the damage building up and killing enemies much faster. Plus with the new and improved teleporting, this move is even less risky to use. Now we unlock his third attack, which allows Sunburn to burst into flames and dash forward. This looks pretty goofy, I'm not gonna lie, and it looks even worse in Spar's adventure. He basically turns into a red nail clipping. Anyway, Imaginators did a little oopsie. I'm sure nobody's surprised about that. See how Sunburn stops at the end of the dash? Yeah, that actually isn't meant to happen until you purchase the soul gem. It's meant to be a smooth dash that you can use repeatedly, but since we can just jump out of it before the animation triggers, it's not a big deal. Plus, the dash doesn't go through enemies in the older games, so I'd still argue it's better in Imaginators. This move can actually do a lot of damage if you charge through a crowd of enemies. Combining this with the teleport made me realise that Sunburn has much better mobility than I thought, and can sink some damage in relatively safely. Well, it's not the most exciting 4th upgrade, but now the flame burst at the start and the end of the teleportation does more damage. While the teleporting is still a defensive move at its core, the extra damage is always useful and it does make a pretty big difference. And that takes us to the split paths. Huh. I'm actually feeling optimistic. I can really see the potential for a good Skylander here. I don't think he has the foundations for a 10 out of 10 or anything, but if these paths can impress me, then Sunburn is going to have a pretty huge redemption arc. So Sunburn has the top path, which buffs the flame breath, and the bottom path, which buffs the teleportation. Let's start with the bottom path, Flame Lord. The first upgrade isn't interesting in the slightest. In fact, it's literally just an improved version of the 4th upgrade. I'm not kidding. So what did I say for that upgrade? Oh yeah. While the teleporting is still a defensive move at its core, the extra damage is always useful and it does make a pretty big difference. The middle upgrade actually gives us a new ability, finally. Now every time you teleport, a streak of flames travels towards the 4 different spots, including the one that you teleport to. This upgrade got a massive visual downgrade in Imaginators, but as far as I'm aware, everything else about it is the same. And it is really cool. The amount of area you can cover with the flame streaks is no joke, and whilst it does less damage than the regular flame bursts, it's still noticeable and super satisfying to use. And just to add on top of that, the final upgrade for this path gives the flame streaks a massive damage buff. This without a doubt makes teleporting Sunburn's strongest offensive weapon. Don't get me wrong, based on pure damage, the flame breath is still better, but the teleporting is going to make getting through big waves of enemies a complete breeze. I won't lie, a pretty good way to wrap up the path. This path has really opened my eyes to Sunburn's variety. I had absolutely no idea how fun and satisfying his teleporting move could be, and a small crowded arena like this makes it the perfect recipe for destruction. While there's nothing too crazy going on, this is still a great path. Well, it's got some shoes to fill, but now we have the top path, Blaze Dragon. The first upgrade for this path gives us infinite fire. It's really great to have more control of your flame breath and you can keep damaging enemies as long as you're safe. This is really effective against slow enemies that you can keep chipping down. But I would be lying if I said that there aren't some fights where you simply cannot use the flame breath for the extra time. But it is still nice to have the option to use it for longer and maximise your damage output. The middle upgrade goes hand in hand with the first one because now the flame breath becomes stronger after you use it for 3 seconds. Once again, the number change is small, but the damage you can build up is significantly higher. The problem with this is that if you need to escape from a situation, there is no way of preserving the extra power. If you teleport, dash, or even jump, then your flame breath is reset. Admittedly, the jumping part is the game's fault and not Sunburn's, but this really stinks when you're against enemies like Percussion Pounder. I'm sorry for calling you fat, okay? I didn't mean it. The 4-second flame breath you get before this path is still generous in my opinion and normally feels like enough to deal a good amount of damage. Especially with how aggressive and in your face some enemies can be, you won't find yourself keeping the extra power for very long. And while, as I said, the damage increase is noticeable, it still feels a bit too small to warrant the extra danger you're putting yourself in. For the last upgrade, now you can reach the final level of flame breath which sets Sunburn on fire, damaging enemies on contact. I can't say that the body damage really ever saved me from getting hit, but think of that as a bonus perk because the insane damage increase is the star of the show here. It's a good thing this upgrade is so strong because Sunburn is at his most vulnerable when in this form. Not only is his speed decreased slightly, but you also still need to go through the middle power stage to get to this one, and it takes an additional second to reach. This means you need 4 seconds without getting hit or having to move out of the way just to reach maximum damage, and who knows how long you'll actually be able to use it for. Sometimes you'll get loads of value from it, sometimes it's better to avoid the risk. It's really cool but extremely situational. So that's both paths tackled, and I'm just going to go ahead and say that there is no ultimately better path for Sunburn. The Flame Lord path adds a whole new offensive element to the teleportation, which makes it a very strong attack for crowd control, and the Blaze Dragon path turns the Flame Breath into a genuinely scary attack which can kill bulky enemies fast. Both of these paths are going to give you a fun and capable Skylander, but the path you should pick will definitely depend on which game you're playing. Because Giants likes giving you a lower number of really strong enemies, the Blaze Dragon path is definitely my go-to. You'll shred through the big boys so quickly they won't even have time to smell the burning of their own flesh. Not to mention the pushback from the Flame Breath, which just makes it 10 times deadlier. I would go as far as to say that Sunburn on the top path is one of the best Skylanders in the entire game, especially on Nightmare mode. On the other hand, because the later installments prefer larger hordes of weaker enemies, it's a lot harder to get good value of the Flame Breath or even reach full power without getting whacked on the head. In most cases, the extra crowd control you get from the Flame Lord path comes in a lot handier. However, if all of the games had the Flame Breath pushing enemies back, it would be a very different story. But it is nice to see his path serving different purposes. I'm glad it's not a completely one-sided path situation like we see with so many of the Skylanders from the first game. Well, you've earned some brownie points there, Sunburn. As for Sparrow's Adventure, who cares? The enemies will die before they reach you. It doesn't matter what path you choose or who you play as at all, because this game can be beaten by a fetus. So the only thing we have left to look at is the Soul Gem, which gives the Phoenix Dash 3 different buffs. This is a well-deserved upgrade because this move has been completely ignored up until now. It makes the dash last longer, along with increasing the damage it does, but also ends the dash with a fiery blast. You know, the one we had the animation for the whole time without the actual attack. The interesting thing about this Soul Gem is that in the first 2 games, some people consider it to be a downgrade. This is because it makes Sunburn stand in place for a second, which kinda ruins the flow of the move. Not great considering it is called Phoenix Dash, so I see where they're coming from. But as we established earlier, in Imaginators you can just jump out of the dash to save time. Another thing that makes the Soul Gem better in the later games is the ridiculous amount of knockback it does. If you try this in the first 2 games, then you only push back the enemies slightly and you might still get hit. It's almost like the later games traded the good Flame Breath for a better Phoenix Dash. What a strange Skylander. Anyway, the explosion sends enemies flying, which makes this upgrade way more useful. The Phoenix Dash benefits from this tremendously, as Sunburn had no way to knock enemies into the air until now. But if you're only playing Sparrow's Adventure or Giants, then it's kinda up to personal preference whether it's worth buying or not. Also, I wouldn't say the Soul Gem really favours one path over the other, so all of my original opinions still stand. And of course, they're all still correct. So, that's Sunburn. Well, that was quite nice actually. I had a really fun time playing as Sunburn, which I wasn't really expecting, but a nice surprise is always welcome. But how will Sunburn stand against the age-old question? Is Sunburn good? Well, he's definitely not bad. Not only can I now say that his placement in my ranking video is invalid, but I can also look forward to using him in the future, especially now that I know how to not suck. What a great win for this guy. Don't get me wrong, he's not the absolute best that the first game has to offer, and is just a middle of the pack Skylander when looking at the series as a whole. His kit starts off really strong, but most of the upgrades don't offer anything too exciting. But at the same time, I gotta give him some credit. For a Sparrow's Adventure character, he's got a pretty deep moveset. I know this sounds crazy considering he used to be my 6th least favourite Skylander, but I'm giving him a 7 out of 10 in Imaginators, a 6.5 out of 10 in Sparrow's Adventure, an 8 out of 10 in Giants, a 7 out of 10 in Swap Force, and a 0 out of 10 in Battlecast. Sorry buddy. While there's no denying he shines the most at Giants, I still kinda prefer him in the jumping games because messing around with the teleportation is just too fun. Maybe that's an outrageous opinion, who knows. But rest assured, we've removed a Skylander from my no likey list, and that was the goal of this video. So, epic. It just doesn't feel right ending the video yet though. Justice still hasn't been served. And I know what to do. You can rest now, sweet dragon.